Hello, in this lecture, we are going to do second order linear differential equations. In the last lecture, we discussed the homogeneous part, that is the homogeneous solution for the homogeneous differential equation that is called as a complementary functions. And we were discussing a few cases like for finding the particular integral using the method of symbolic operators. So we are going to continue that discussion today. Okay, so let us start with a few questions, and then we'll take a few other cases. Okay. Okay. So question says, again, for us in GATE exam only. So question says that every solution of y double dash plus a by dash plus b by equal to 0, where a and b are some real constants, approximate to 0, as x tends to infinity, provided now following options are given to you. Okay, so following options are given to you. So every solution of y double dash plus a by dash plus b by equal to 0, where a and b are real constants, approximate to 0. That is, as x tends to infinity, this particular solution of this particular differential equation. So solution for this particular differential equation given by dy by d2 upon dx2 plus a dy by dx plus b by equal to 0, approximate to 0 as x tends to infinity, provided which of the following is true. So that we have to see. So how to do this question? Okay, so I know that this is a differential equation with constant coefficient, and it is homogeneous differential equation. So solution for the homogeneous differential equation is called as complementary function. Okay, and how it is found? It is found first by solving the auxiliary equation. So your auxiliary equation is this, and the auxiliary equation says that it will be equals to, the roots will be equals to minus a plus minus a square minus 4b divided by twice, right? So this is how it is going to be. So now, if these roots are real and unequal, then there will be some roots. If these roots are real and equal, then there will be some roots, and so on and so forth. So let us take cases. So the first case would be if these roots are real. If m1 is equals to minus a plus root over minus 4b upon 2. This is your first root. Let us write it as m1 only. Okay, let us write it as m1 only. And m2 is another root which is given by minus a minus root over a square minus 4b divided by twice a. If these roots are real and equal, ये कब होगा? Only when your a square is greater than 4b. Only if a square is greater than 4b, only then these roots will be real and unequal. So if this is the condition, that is discriminant is greater than 0, only then you will have real and unequal roots. And if you have real and unequal roots, then the solution is given by C1 e की power m1x plus C2 e की power m2x. Okay, this is how the solution is given. Now it says that the solution tends to 0 as x tends to infinity. First, let us write yx is equal to what? It is equal to C1 e की power minus a plus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2. You write it here, x plus C2 exp. Here I should write minus a minus root over a square minus 4b divided by twice a x. Okay. Now, if a is greater than 0, if a is less than 0, so if here I'm writing if a is less than 0, then this part will become positive. The part that I'm like showing you right now, this part will become positive. And positive plus positive will be positive. And overall, I know that as x tends to infinity, my first parenthesis, I'm writing my first parenthesis or first bracket, or you have a first term, it goes to infinity. It goes to infinity. You can see that. That is, if your a is less than 0, forget about this term. Even if you consider the first term, you can see that as if a is less than 0, if a is less than 0, this will be like negative, negative, positive. Overall, it will be positive. X tends to infinity, this will go to infinity. Okay. The another thing is that you can see that if there may be two possible cases. Now here writing for b, what can, so a cannot be less than 0 for sure. So a cannot be less than 0. It has to be greater than 0. This is very much clear. So you can straight away reject those options where a is given less than 0. So reject this option and reject this option. Why I'm rejecting? Because if a is less than 0, if my a is less than 0, then this will become positive. Tending to infinity, this will go towards infinity. Whatever may be the fate of this thing, let's say, because exponential hai, it will be only positive value, right? Either it is 0 or positive, like 0 only if your x tends to infinity and this is a negative term. Only in that case I'm saying. But if I'm saying that your a square, if I'm saying that your अच्छा ये भी मैं तुम्हारा कर ही देता हूँ. Let us say, now consider two cases, whether b is greater than 0 or b is less than 0. So agar b is less than 0, then clearly this bracket, that is a square minus 4b, would be anyway greater than a. पक्की बात है. अगर b less than 0 है तो negative negative positive, so this whole term, can I not compare this way? खुद सोचो, a square minus 4b, अगर b less than 0 है, if b is less than 0, then a square minus 4b would obviously be greater than root over a square. Is that clear? आप पॉजिटिव संख्या में कोई पॉजिटिव संख्या जोड़ रहे हो, you are adding a positive number to a positive number, because if b is less than 0, then minus 4b will be positive, a square is positive, a square plus positive number will always be greater than root over a square. So in any case, this term would be greater than a. Is that clear or not clear?
Clear, sir.
Okay, so now I'm taking two cases. Now if here only consider, so case one I'm considering, जिससे तुम्हें clear हो जाए. If a is less than 0, then the first term would go to infinity for sure. What about second term? For second term, we need to find whether your a square minus 4b is greater than or less than a. This is something that we need to find. Now I'm saying, in order to find that, first we need to be sure that what is the sign of b. If b is less than 0, if b is less than 0, or b is greater than 0. Agar b is less than 0, if b is less than 0, then clearly root over a square minus 4b would be greater than root over a square, which implies root over a square minus 4b would be greater than a. Okay, it implies that in magnitude, if I compare, the magnitude of root over a square minus 4b would be greater than the magnitude of a, isn't it? So root over a square is mostly has to do with something called as magnitude. Okay, so root over a square is magnitude of a, right? Root over a square is mod of a. Are you getting my point? So अब देखो, if a is, first case, if a is negative, अगर a negative है, then what does minus a represent? Minus a is nothing but modulus of a. सोचो, अगर a negative है, तो minus a क्या बताएगा? उसका modulus value तो बताएगा. a negative है, मान लो -3 है. -3 of -3, 3 नहीं आ जाएगा, तो मॉडुलस ऑफ -3 में बता रहा हूँ ये चीज. तो ये पहला टर्म क्या हो जाएगा? मॉड है. थोड़ा ध्यान से देखो, इस वाले टर्म को मॉड है लिख दो मन में. Now if a is less than 0, I'm writing जो फर्स्ट टर्म है इसको लिख रहा हूँ mod a minus root over a square minus 4b. अब मुझे बताओ, this it will be positive or negative? Clearly you know that if a is less than 0, then I know that, and also I know that if b is less than 0, then this will be greater than the magnitude of a. Okay, well, overall this term will be less than 0. It implies if a is less than 0, I'm writing if a is less than 0 and b is less than 0, the first term goes towards infinity and second term goes towards 0. Why? Because this whole term is negative, and if this whole term is negative, then tending to infinity, this whole term would become 0. Is that clear or not? Or should I repeat it? देखो, अगर b is less than 0, if b is less than 0, then a square minus 4b का root over will be greater than root over a square. Or in other terms, root over a square minus 4b would be greater than magnitude of a. Now, come back to the original problem. Original problem was if a is less than 0, then what about minus a? Minus a can be written as modulus of a. This is modulus of a minus root over a square minus b square. I've already stated that root over a square minus 4b is greater than modulus of a, which implies what? Which implies that a minus root over a square minus 4b would be less than 0. Modulus of a minus root over a square minus 4b would be less than 0. So this whole term would be negative. Tending to infinity, this whole term would become 0. So if a is less than 0 and b is less than 0, overall your y tends to infinite because your second term is tending to 0 and your first term is tending towards infinity. So that is what I did. In exam, you have to wait straight away, but actually explained it. So this cannot be the case because as x tends to infinity, your y is not tending to 0, rather it is tending towards infinity. Is that clear or not clear?
Clear, sir.
Okay. Now, next case, let us take the next case. So another case was if a is less than 0, if a is less than 0, agar a is less than 0, then what will happen? And let us take the case if b is greater than 0. So this is what. So if a is less than 0, anyway, the first term would go towards first term would go to infinity. That is for sure. That was, and this all these subheadings are coming for the case del greater than 0. So we are considering del greater than 0. That is very much clear. This is what I've written here. So this is under the heading that if though the roots are real and unequal, that is if a square is greater than 4b. So that is wo to chali raha hai. So now the first term would go to infinity. What about second term? The second term says exponential. I'm not writing constants. Minus a minus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2. So now, if your b is greater than 0, if b is greater than 0, then surely a square minus 4b would be less than root over a square. Now, because if b is greater than 0, then a square se koi cheez ghat raha hai. That is, that you are subtracting something from a square. So obviously a square would be greater than root over a square would be greater than root over a square minus 4b. So I can write that magnitude of a would be greater than root over a square minus 4b, or in other words, I can write modulus of a minus root over a square minus 4b would be greater than 0. Is that clear? Now, if this is the case, that is, if magnitude minus root over a square minus 4b is greater than 0, then what will happen? You can see here that now if I consider the second term, if a is less than 0 and b is greater than 0, then this term I can write exponential. This term I can write modulus because again I told you that if a is less than 0, magnitude of a can be written as minus of a. So the first term is minus a, so I am writing magnitude of a minus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2x. Now you can see that mod of a minus root over a square minus 4b is positive. So this entire term would be some positive term. And as x tends to infinity, this whole term would go towards infinity. That is, your second term would also go toward infinity. So in any case, if your a is less than 0 as well as b is less than 0, sorry, b is greater than 0, then your y as a function of x would go towards infinity as x tends to infinity. Is that clear? So this also cancels your option number D. So I'm explaining the entire thing as x tends to infinity and y tends to infinity. Is that clear or not clear? कौन है बाकी? कोई बच्चा नहीं आएगा? अल्पना को समझ में आया? भरत को, सलोनी को?
Yes, sir.
ओके गुड. तो ये समझ में आया. एग्जाम में क्या करोगे? अगर एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन आता है, चुपचाप ऐसी ए और बी की वैल्यूज रखना जिससे ये क्वाड्रेटिक इक्वेशन इजीली सॉल्वेबल हो जाए. आर यू गेटिंग माय पॉइंट? एग्जाम में क्या करोगे? फॉर एग्जांपल ए ग्रेटर देन 0, बी ग्रेटर देन 0. सी, in exam you have to be prompt, so you know that you are given a differential equation and you do not have this much amount of time which I'm exerting right now. So what you do, you know, now you are quite old enough to understand that you can choose some a or b's, because this is true for every such a and b. That is, whatever statement is written, it is true for all a greater than 0, b greater than 0. That is what I want to say. That is, if a is correct, it is correct for all a greater than 0 and for all b greater than 0. Not even a single exception would work here. ठीक है, तो क्या करना, let's say तुमने a को ले लिया 7 और b को ले लिया 12, because you know that if a is 7 then this can be written as x plus 3 into x plus 4. समझ पा रहे हो? I mean sorry, d plus 3 plus d plus 4. ऐसे करके you can take four values which are easily solvable, like you know the roots of it, फटाफट जिसके निकाल सकते हैं. ऐसा नहीं पता चला कि roots पे मतलब surds बन रही हैं and you're again solving another difficulty. So that you can do. Are you getting? However, I'm solving it in general, but what you can do, you can take some values of a and b. So if a is greater than 0, b is greater than 0, take a 7, b 12, or take a 5 and b 6. So if a is 5, 2x plus 3x, 2d plus 3d, and this will be like 6. Are you getting my point? So in that way also you can do. So you have to be prompt enough there, because ऐसा मत चूज कर लेना कि इसकी रूट निकालने में आफत हो जाए, फिर तुमको वहां पता चला रूट निकाल लो बैठ के. ठीक है, दैट डोंट डू, वो नहीं होना चाहिए. नाउ if a is greater than 0 and if b is greater than 0, now if a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0, or should I take the first case, b less than 0? If a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, this is the case. If this is the case and all these cases are falling under the definition that if del is greater than 0, are you getting my point? So I'm not on that point. So if a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, if a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, then what will happen? I'm writing again the solution part. Solution would be, forget about some constants that, ठीक है लिख लो यार, c1 root over a square minus 4b divided by 2 x plus c2, and then you have this exponential and you have this minus a minus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2x. This is how it is. Now if if a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, okay? If b is less than 0, what will happen? Again the same thing, a square minus 4b would be greater than a mod a. That is something that we've already done, because if b is less than 0, in any case this will be greater than root over a square. So I will write this. Okay, is that clear? And now understand that your a is positive. So your a is positive. तो थोड़ा ध्यान रखिए. So if a is positive, then modulus of a लिखो चाहे a लिखो बात है ना, because अगर कोई चीज पॉजिटिव है तो उसका मैग्नीट्यूड लिखो चाहे a लिखो बात है. So what I'll write, y of x is equal to c1 exponential minus modulus of a plus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2, and this is like x here, and then c2 you write exponential here and you write minus of modulus of a minus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2 x. Now you can see that the second term, there's a negative here and then there is a negative here. This is positive, negative here. So this will turn towards 0 as x tends to infinity. So you don't need to check anything here. So this will tend to 0 as x tends to infinity. Is that clear to you? Now what about the first term? You know that this term, a square minus 4b root over a square minus 4b is greater than magnitude of a. So this term is greater than this term. So if this term is greater than this term, if it also subtracts some of it, but overall this will remain positive. Overall this will remain positive. देखो ना, ये positive ज़्यादा है बनस्पत इसके. So in comparison to the first term, the second term is more positive than the first term. Even if the first term b has a negative sign, it cannot make it entirely negative. It will be positive. So I know that the first term would go towards infinity, x tends to infinity. Is that clear? So if a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, again this option is discouraged, or you can reject this option. So if a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, this is also incorrect, because here also as x tends to infinity, your y is tending towards infinity. Is that clear or not clear? देख लो ध्यान से. If a is greater than 0 and b is less than 0, the entire thing is clear to you. And now let us take last case. If a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0. If both are greater than 0, then what will happen? This is very much clear that your second term will now also go towards 0. Why? Because the second term was corresponding to exponential minus a minus root over a square minus 4b upon twice, and this is x. And understand, I have taken the case where discriminant is greater than 0. So if discriminant is greater than 0, then this term will be positive. Root over positive is again positive. Negative is here. Negative is here. Overall, this will become negative. X, then x tends to infinity. This whole term will go towards 0. So as x tends to infinity, the entire second term would go to 0. What about the first term? The first term is given by exponential, and then you have this minus of, I think, modulus of a. I'm comparing, like writing modulus of a, then I'm writing plus root over a square minus 4b, and then I'm writing divided by 2, and then I'm writing x. Okay, now understand, if b is greater than 0, if b is greater than 0, then a square minus 4b will certainly be less than root over a square. Because if b is greater than 0, you're subtracting something from a square. So obviously this side will be heavier, that's the right hand side. So I'll write that modulus of a in any way is greater than root over a square minus 4b, and it b has a negative sign in front of it. So basically this particular term is more negative than the entire positive term. The term, this is positive, this is also positive, but there is a negative here. So overall this term will become negative. And if this term becomes negative, the first term would go towards 0 as x tends to infinity. So I'm writing that first term would go towards 0 as x tends to infinity. Are you getting my point? So the first term is also going towards 0. The second term is also going towards 0. So as x tends to infinity, your solution yx will tend to 0 perfectly only if a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0, and further del should be greater than 0. Okay? Is that clear?
सर ये जो लास्ट में अभी समझाया वो एक बार फिर बताइए.
देखो, if a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0, agar a be greater than 0 and b be greater than 0, understand the fact that a square minus 4b in that case would be less than root over a square. देखो क्यों? क्योंकि a square में कोई चीज घटा रहे हो, ठीक है? Because now b is greater than 0. If b is greater than 0, this is a negative term, like negative, समझ लो 4b is positive, a square में कोई चीज घट रही है. If you're subtracting something from a square, obviously this will be less than root over a square, or you can write a square minus 0. Is that clear? I'm not subtracting anything from here. I'm subtracting a positive thing from here. So obviously this side will be heavier. So I'll write that modulus of a would be greater than a square minus 4b. I have been given that a is positive. So whether I write a or modulus of a, they are one and the same thing. So instead of a, I'll write modulus of a. ठीक है? अगर कोई चीज 3 है, मतलब पॉजिटिव है, तो 3 का मॉड लिखो चाहे 3 लिखो, बात एक होगी. बट व्हाट इज द थिंग? एंड ऑलवेज रिमेंबर रूट ओवर एक्स स्क्वायर इज मॉडुलस ऑफ एक्स. इसलिए हम राइटिंग दिस मॉडुलस टाइम एंड अगेन. सो इंस्टेड ऑफ a, I have written mod a plus root over a square minus 4b divided by 2x. This was your first term. Now understand this term, ये जो second term दिख रहा है तुमको, this term is less than modulus of a. So this term is less than modulus of a. So if this term is less than modulus of a, so overall the numerator will become negative, because this is less than mod a. Here there is a mod a with a negative sign. So overall the numerator will become negative. Overall this term would become negative, and it implies that as x tends to infinity, this entire term will go to 0. The second term was going to 0. I don't think there I need to explain anything, because this is negative, this is negative, this is positive, this is positive. Overall, a negative term you take common out. Overall, this will be negative times some positive quantity. So as x tends to infinity, this will go to 0. So in any case, both the first and second terms are going towards 0 as x tends to infinity. So I hope the answer is clear, that if a is greater than 0, b is greater than 0, and if del is greater than 0, then it will then only then your limit will go towards 0 as x tends to infinity. Okay, this is not an ideal exam approach. Okay, I'm making you comfortable with my sort of learning. That is, whenever I'm going to do this rigorous, so that होगा क्या कि ये बार बार मैं x tends to infinity और इस तरह की लिमिट्स लूंगा तो तुम्हारी आदत बन जाएगी. एग्जाम में डोंट डू दिस विल बी वेरी लॉन्ग अप्रोच फॉर एग्जाम. ओके, अभी तो 2 केसेस और बाकी हैं, del इक्वल टू 0 एंड del लेस देन 0. सो ऐसा मत करना एग्जाम में, ठीक है? एग्जाम में चुपचाप, आई एम सेइंग, जिसका तुम्हें बचपन से, इतने छोटे से बच्चे से बड़े हुए हो, तुम्हें क्वाड्रेटिक इक्वेशन सॉल्व करनी आती है, राइट? टेक दोज, make this such a quadratic equation which can be easily solved. ठीक है? फॉर एग्जाम्पल द फर्स्ट केस के लिए मैंने बताया, एग्जाम्पल लो 7 12 या 5 एंड 6. इधर 5 ले लो, इधर 6 ले लो, तो d स्क्वायर प्लस 5d प्लस 6. So d plus 2, d plus 3, d is equal to minus 2, d equal to minus 3, m equal to minus 2, m equal to minus 3, c1 e की पावर minus 2x plus c2 equal to पावर minus 3x, x tends to infinity, खत्म. ऑप्शन नंबर 1 टिक करके आ जाओ. सिंपल, सोचना ही नहीं है, अदरवाइज डिटेल में ऐसे जाएगा. आर यू गेटिंग माई पॉइंट और नॉट गेटिंग माई पॉइंट? मैं लिख भी देता हूँ इसको, सो दैट इन एग्जाम, because this is true for all a greater than 0 and b greater than 0, mind you. So if it is greater than, it is true for all a greater than 0, b greater than 0, then taking any of the option will solve the function. और देखो अगर इनमें से कोई एक भी ऑप्शन लिया मैंने, it is true for all a less than 0 and b less than 0, and if I take an option, if I take an example which is contradicting this, then it will be completely wrong. Is that clear or not clear? Is that clear, not clear? देखो इन एग्जाम फर्स्ट ऑप्शन के लिए ले लो 5 and b ले लो 6. So what it will become, d square plus 5d plus 6 equal to 0, or you can write m square plus 5m plus 6 equal to 0. That implies your m should be minus 2 minus 3 c1 e की power minus 2x c2 e की power minus 3x x टेंस इनफिनिटी 0 0 खत्म, क्वेश्चन सॉल्व. सोचने की जरूरत नहीं थी. ठीक है. So in exam don't go for this long approach. I'm just making you do all these things so that you become quite comfortable with difficult things. Is that clear or not clear? सब ओके, सब कहाँ चले गए? क्लियर तो बोल दो महाराजा. कल्पना
Yes,
क्लियर,
sir.
क्लियर, रजित क्लियर, रूप क्लियर, सलोनी क्लियर.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है. एक ही तो काम बोला है क्लियर बोलने के लिए, वो भी नहीं बोलते हो. चलो अब नेक्स्ट पे आते हैं ना. अभी क्लियर हो गया, मतलब खत्म हो गया क्वेश्चन, सॉल्व हो गया सही तरीके से. ठीक है. व्हाट इफ डेल इज इक्वल टू 0? तो ये तो लिखा ही नहीं है कि रूट्स रियल नहीं होनी, रियल और इक्वल नहीं हो सकती है, राइट? So if del is equal to 0, what will happen? I will write my m is equals to minus a by 2. Is that clear? Because now if del is equal to 0, that implies your a square minus 4b should be equal to 0. Is that clear? And if a square minus 4b is greater than 0, it implies a square should be equal to 4b. It implies a square should be equal to 4b. It implies b has to be greater than 0. पहली चीज तो यहाँ से क्लियर हो गई, because if a square is equal to 4b, that implies your b has to be greater than 0. Done. Now there are two cases. Either your a would be negative or a would be positive. b would be positive anyway. B would be positive anyway. दिख रहा है b is greater than 0. There is no doubt regarding this. Is that clear or not clear? यहाँ तक समझ में आई बात? ठीक है. Now first case, if a is less than 0, then what will happen? Now solution, because the roots are equal, will be given by c1 plus c2x e की power minus a by 2x. Is that clear? Now if a is less than 0, negative negative is positive, so this entire term would go towards infinity as x tends to infinity. If a is less than 0, negative negative is positive. So if a is less than 0, then simply you can write your minus a as modulus of a. So modulus of a divided by 2, this entire thing is positive. X tends to infinity, this entire term would go towards infinity. There's no doubt regards that. Now, if a is greater than 0, then your y as a function of x would be given by c1 plus c2x, and you can now write upon e की power a by 2x. Because instead of writing e की power minus a by 2x, I'm preferring writing this. Apply L'Hospital rule, and you can clearly find that as x tends to infinity, your yx would go towards 0. So from here also you know that if del is equal to 0, the solution will only be tending to 0 if x, as x tends to 0, as x tends to infinity, if a is greater than 0. And there was no doubt regarding b has to be greater than 0, because if del is equal to 0, it implies a square minus 4b is to be 0, a square equal to 4b, that implies b has to be greater than 0. So again, we arrive at a solution that if a is greater than 0, b is greater than 0, and del is equal to 0, then also as x tends to infinity, your yx would tend towards 0. So your yx is tending to 0 as x tends to infinity for two cases. That is, if del is greater than 0, then also you are arriving that a should be greater than 0 and b greater than 0. And if del is equal to 0, then also you are arriving at a solution that a must be greater than 0 and b must be greater than 0. Is that clear? Last option, if del is less than 0. If del is less than 0, a square minus 4b would be less than 0. You can write a square minus 4b as some, let's say, beta square. You write it as beta square. So, like anything, मतलब समझ पा रहे हो? तो इसको बीटा स्क्वायर लिख दो, माइनस बीटा स्क्वायर लिख दिया. ठीक है. a square minus 4b, you write it as minus 4b. माइनस बीटा स्क्वायर, या फिर मतलब समझ पा रहे हो तो व्हाट, चलो मैं वैसे कर देता हूँ, जनरल में लिखते हैं. सो y एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ x, नाउ आई कैन राइट इट एज c1. इस c1 e1 को छोड़ो, तुम सिर्फ इस पे ध्यान दो. एक्सपोनेंशियल माइनस a माइनस आयोटा, सॉरी प्लस आयोटा रूट ओवर 4b minus a square upon 2, and then you write exponential, and then you write uh, minus a minus iota root over 4b upon 2. Is that clear or not clear? यहां तक समझ में आया? ये चीज समझ में आई नहीं आई यहां तक?
आ रही सर.
रजित, अल्पना, रूप किशोर, सलोनी, समझ में आई? भरत समझ में आई नहीं आई?
यस सर, आ रही.
अल्पना समझ में आई, भरत समझ में आई, रूप को समझ में आई सर? ठीक है. सो व्हाट आई हैव रिटन ए स्क्वायर माइनस
हाँ
फोर बी. नेगेटिव है तो इसको क्या लिख दोगे? इसको लिख दो, लेट्स से मतलब मैंने क्या किया, 4b माइनस ए स्क्वायर को पॉजिटिव बोल के एक आयोटा आगे कर दी. या फिर एक काम करो, राइट दिस एंटायर 4b minus a square as some beta square, so that your life becomes a still better easy, थोड़ा सा easy. This will like exponential minus a, कुछ constants हैं, मतलब I'm not concerned there, iota beta upon 2, and this will be like x here, and then there will be exponential minus a by 2, and this minus iota beta upon 2x. And you know that this actually summarizes to writing e की power minus a by 2x, and then there will be some c1 cos beta x. You can write some constants here, a, b. You can write some constants here, a, b. I'm not concerned about all these things, but c1 plus c2 sin beta x. And I told you on that particular day that this particular term in any way would lie between c1 का square plus c2 का square minus से लेकर root over c1 का square plus c2 का square for all x belongs to R. That implies this term is bounded. Anyway, this is bounded. For all x belongs to R, this is a bounded term. But what about this term? This will become unbounded only if a is less than 0. Only if a is less than 0. But if a is greater than 0, then e की power minus a by 2x will tend towards 0 as x tends to infinity. And you know that this is a bounded term. So any bounded term here times this. I know that as x tends to infinity, this will lie between this only. So this will be some constant between this. I'm not concerned. Like this will be some constant between minus root over c1 squared plus c2 squared से लेकर root over c1 squared plus c2 squared. But then there's this term as well. So as x tends to infinity, this will become to 0. So overall entire term will become 0 as x tends to infinity, provided a is greater than 0. If a is less than 0, then this term will go towards infinity. And then this term is oscillating between these two numbers. So I cannot say that this is tending to 0. Okay, now this is tending to a very large infinite quantity, which is oscillating. So it is oscillating from minus infinity to plus infinity. Is that clear or not? What I'm trying to say that if a is less than 0, then this entire term would become infinity. And this infinity times number, which is again oscillating between minus root over c1 square plus c2 square से लेकर root over c1 square plus c2 square, would eventually make it oscillate between minus infinity to plus infinity, provided a is less than 0. If a is less than 0, then this entire limit will oscillate indefinitely from minus infinity to plus infinity. It can never be 0 as such. So the limit is in fact not unique right here. Okay, but if x is tending to infinity and if a is greater than 0, then this entire term will go towards 0 as x tends to infinity. Now, what do you think would be b? What do you think is b here? So del is greater than 0. If I'm discussing this, if I'm discussing the case of del less than 0, a must be greater than 0. This is quite clear. What about the sign of b? Do we have any hint on b, or do we have no hint on b? So we already know that your a square minus 4b is written to be less than 0. It implies your 4b has to be greater than a square, and that implies your b should be greater than a square by 4. A square by 4 would be obviously greater than 0. That implies your b should be greater than 0. Is that clear or not? Or otherwise, because you have studied your complex number, so now let me check your complex number. M square am plus b. This was your auxiliary equation, right? Now, if it had two complex roots, if it had two complex roots, now let me write them for example, alpha comma beta and alpha minus beta. I'm not writing minus a plus something, but I'm just writing in general that if this auxiliary equation had complex roots, then it had some then one root would be alpha plus beta, another root would be alpha minus beta. Is that clear? Now go back to your standard 11th. The product of roots gives you c by a, which incidentally happens to be b by 1. And the product of roots will come out as alpha square plus beta square b by 1. That implies b is equal to alpha square plus beta square greater than 0. So b has to be greater than 0. In any case, for del less than 0 also, we are arriving at a solution that as x tends to infinity, your y would tend to 0 only if your a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0. Is that clear? So in all the cases, we have arrived that a should be greater than 0, b should be greater than 0. So the answer should be a must be greater than 0, b must be greater than 0 for the differential equation y double dash plus ay plus by equal to 0. If we want that as x tends to infinity, your yx should tend to 0. Is that clear or not clear? So this sums up your question. ठीक है? इतना बड़ा एग्जाम में प्लीज मत करना, नहीं तो पक्का यही करके आओगे, बाकी सब छोड़ के आ जाओगे. ठीक है? ठीक है? So एग्जाम में क्या करने का? एग्जाम में just place options and clear it off. Is that clear or not clear?
Clear, sir.
Okay, so next lecture we are going to discuss some like other cases for the particular integral, and let us meet in the next lecture. Okay, so only 2 days it will require me to finish this entire stuff. So by Tuesday you can expect, or probably by Wednesday one lecture, you can expect that your differential equation is going to be done. Okay.